going on, Captain?
Contact Starfleet. We're being attacked by an enemy. Ensign Uhura. You're supposed to be on medical leave, are you not?
Coming up, Ensign Uhura begins experiencing a series of terrifying hallucinations that make her question her sanity.
But are the ringing in her ears and frightening visions the result of a mental breakdown or by sinister outside forces?
Listen. The things you've been seeing, I've been seeing them too. It wasn't real.
How does Uhura get a grip on reality before the Enterprise is placed in jeopardy?
Emergency transport, beam us out now.
And how does the appearance of James T. Kirk alter the chain of events?
We'll talk about all this and more
Coming up on the Strange New Worlds edition of Energize.
Energize.
We're boldly going into the uncharted regions of the Star Trek universe before Captain Kirk.
You're listening to Energize, a Star Trek Strange New Worlds podcast, your source for in-depth analysis, colorful debate, and exciting discussions about the new adventures of Captain Pike and the Enterprise crew. I'm your host, Anthony McLemore.
And I'm Steve Truitt.
This week, Uhura comes to terms with long-held fears as she loses her grip on reality.
While Spock and Chapel, James Kirk and La'an, and Una and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Pelia confront issues of their own.
Here's a Warp Speed recap of Season 2, Episode 6 of Strange New Worlds, Lost in Translation.
Enterprise has been sent to Bannon's Nebula on the edge of explored space. Sorry to interrupt, Captain. I'm receiving a signal.
On speakers? Anytime, Ensign.
It's gone.
Based on what you heard and saw, and the elevated readings from your visual cortex, I'd say it's pretty clear you hallucinate. You have a mild case of deuterium poisoning.
There's a theory that extra-dimensional life forms could actually poke into our space and attach themselves to atoms from our dimension.
Invisible aliens are using your brain as a universal translator.
Captain! You have to shut down the station! It's a matter of life or death!
Okay, well, Steve, this particular episode had a mix of things. It was an Uhura-centric episode, but they put buttons everywhere else on a lot of different stories. So I thought it was a kind of a cool mix of things.
Interesting. It felt to me very much like a mid-season episode, and this is episode 6. That's almost mid-season in a way. But yeah, a panoply, if you will, of exciting stuff. And I'm glad they focused largely on Uhura. We haven't seen much of her story this season.
Yeah, so, and the great thing about this show, and I think we pointed it out before, is that everyone gets their time in this show. And I think that's really, really cool. It isn't just like in the original series, it's the 3 main characters and that's it.
Yeah.
It's always the 3.
Yeah.
They focus on a lot more players, and I think that makes for a more fulfilling and complete story.
And it works, too, because I think it also creates a really nice camaraderie between the cast, not the characters, but the cast themselves. And I think that makes them friends. We saw that in Next Generation, and that's why they stayed friends for so long.
Absolutely.
You have the original series where, everyone hates Kirk except for the 2 guys that he worked with all the time,
Exactly. So, what happens behind the scenes bleeds over into what happens on set, and I think you can see that it's a good vibe.
Yeah, I agree.
All around.
Communications Officer's Law. Enterprise has been sent to Bannon's Nebula on the edge of explored space.
So we start with the Uhura's log. The Enterprise has been dispatched to a nebula on the edge of explored space, and this nebula is full of deuterium, which fuels starships. So there have been a string of technical issues onlining this Federation refinery, which is months behind schedule. So we also find out that this refinery is also is strategic, as it is near Gorn's space.
Yeah, and I thought that was almost a throwaway when they said it, because I'm thinking like, well, are we going to see Gorn? Is something going to happen? Are they going to show up in some way? And I'm going to say at the outset of this podcast today, I think that they were a part of this episode, but I can't say how until the end.
Yeah, well, I honestly think that something is brewing. I mean, I was hoping that the Gorn would make their appearance. I'm ready for a really good fight.
Yeah, me too.
I'm ready for it. But they've been, teasing this since episode 1 when Spock took the ship, and they said, we need Spock because of what's to come. And so we know where this is going to end. The Gorn will make an appearance before the season is over. Now, the question is how, in what capacity, and how devastating will it be for the crew of the Enterprise?
I hear congratulations are in order, Fleet Captain.
Stop it.
So at the outset, we find out that Pike has temporarily been promoted to Fleet Captain, as he is now over the refinery onlining and the USS Farragut that is assisting in this. And so I'm just like, okay, Farragut.
Kirk.
Yeah, sounds like Kirk. Kirk's coming. Yeah. So at that point, I'm just wondering how is Kirk going to come into this?
I was too, and my first thought was, wait a second, are we going to be seeing Kirk a lot? I know this is called Strange New Worlds, and so it could be anybody and anything, but I started to think, like, God, I really loved episode 3, when La'an and Kirk got together. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. Here we are, it's an alternate reality, yes, but basically Kirk and La'an are getting together, and he ends up being the one that fights and kills Khan in the future, Khan Noonien Singh, and that's her great-great-grandfather. And I never put that connection together. Like, wait a second, why are they getting together? Yeah.
I like it. It's really layered, and it's kind of a mind screw, because we're talking about the alt reality, but we're also talking about the prime timeline. And then in the prime timeline, Kirk does kill her great-great-grandfather. So weird.
And here he is again, and they're going to at least see each other on the Enterprise.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for that moment at this point. But we find out that Kirk has been recently promoted to first officer aboard the Farragut, and it's no shock. I mean, he moves up through the ranks really fast because of his tenacity and his creativity and those kinds of things. Yeah. And another thing that I liked was that at some point later, when Kirk does come aboard, he he sees his brother, and it opened up, some really good story points between the two brothers, and it actually made sense.
So, what's new and exciting in the world of xenoanthropology?
Why don't we skip to your news?
Wow. Sensing some hostility there, Sam?
Not at all.
I wasn't comfortable with it at first because I'm not a huge Sam Kirk fan. I hate the mustache. I always will. I can't stand mustaches. Sorry, everybody. I just don't think mustaches on men look good. I'm a child of the 70s when it was supposed to be cool, but then in the 80s, it's like, nope, you're creepy. So I kind of stuck there. But yeah, I was like, there's a lot of exposition, and there's the tension and the jealousy, which I get. I have a brother. You have a brother.
Yep.
We know brotherly dynamics, but the writing in this one felt a little on the nose. I like writing when it's what they're not saying that we're interpreting. And they were kind of on the nose about it. They're just like, Dad liked you better, or whatever it was. And I just felt it was just a little too easy of a layup. I thought it was a little weak in the writing department. I
can understand that. But I do like the fact that they explored the rivalry between the two, because Sam is in science and Kirk, is following in his dad's footsteps, which is more of a action, swashbuckling
leadership.
Leadership, role. And I think that Sam is insecure about that.
Well, without a doubt, and I get it, and I think that we can see that in a different way. If I were to have been given that episode to write, I would have had Sam talk down to Kirk, to Jim, as a scientist, and then you would see, that dynamic. Like he thinks he's smarter, and you just interpret it that they've got issues, or whatever. Anyway, that's what I would have done.
Sorry to interrupt, Captain. I'm receiving a signal.
On speakers? Anytime, Ensign.
It's gone.
So, Uhura's on the bridge and she's noticeably exhausted and distracted, and Uhura suddenly receives a signal in her ear, this piercing signal. But when it's time to play it back, it's nowhere to be found. So no one else heard it. And that makes Uhura immediately investigate it. And she goes into the nacelles to recalibrate the communication array, utilizing a video from the late Hemmer that gave her instructions on how to do so.
First, disable the subspace antenna. Check for a charge on the EPS manifold before disconnecting this tap. Perfect.
I love this scene on so many levels and for so many reasons. The first is, it never happens that you see anybody in a nacelle. As a side note, when I was writing spec scripts for Star Trek, I wrote a scene of Voyager where they had to go into the nacelle itself to collect deuterium. The Bussard collectors, those red glowy things in the front of the nacelles,
yes,
when they opened up and started collecting deuterium also, I fell in love with that. I loved what they did there. It was incredible. And you could see all the way down the nacelle to the end to those blue lights. So I love that visually, I just thought it was stunning and so great to see. But I had missed Hemmer, and I loved seeing him on that pad, and it was really great.
Yeah, and Uhura and Hemmer had a special relationship because, as we know, last season, Uhura was kind of lost. She just kind of joined Starfleet because a relative, was in Starfleet. She had lost her parents, and she was just kind of lost because she didn't know her purpose of what she wanted to do. And I remember she had offended a lot of people in the room when she said that, basically she just did it. Whereas everybody else wanted a stepping stone kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but Hemmer talked to her about finding her purpose and not shutting people out as she had done previously. And that was one of the the final things he said when he died. And so you can see that still resonates with her.
Yeah, and as I said last season, losing him in that beautiful scene when he fell to his death, and I it was so emotional to see him again. I really felt that again, right? But she sees him again, and in this time it's kind of freaky because she goes into the turbolift, and there he is, and he looks a little bit like he's been
Walking Dead,
decaying for the last year.
Yeah. It looks like a scene straight out of Walking Dead. And so that was one of many hallucinations that she had throughout the show. She sees Hemmer, which was scary. Later on, she saw dead crew members in the corridors, and then she gets into, while in this hallucination, gets into a fight with someone who looks like her, and it's actually James Kirk, who she decks in the face.
Yeah, and so here's what I'm starting to think at this point. Is this a Gorn trick? Because remember they mentioned the Gorn. I kept thinking, is this the Gorn? Is this the Gorn? Are they playing with her mind in some way or another and getting the crew to turn on each other? That's what I thought this episode was going to be. Because they're in Gorn space, the Gorn is somehow secretly putting hallucinogens in the deuterium to, I don't know. So that's what I was thinking.
No, I think you actually have a good point, because when it was the episode where they went down to the planet and there was blood everywhere, and then they some people that had escaped, and the girl talked about there was something, a ringing or some sort, and that's all they could remember it was something, and they thought, oh, maybe it was some kind of plasma charges or whatever went off in the atmosphere. But no, I think you have a good point. I was wondering if this was leading to something more sinister.
Yeah
So, you know, she's having these, these different hallucinations, which also included, the bridge crew being sucked out and vented into space. So I was just like, oh my gosh, you're wondering whether or not she actually really does have issues.
Yeah, and is this a foreshadowing what's happening here? Again, I think I'm glad they gave her this episode because I wanted to see more of her anyway, and I think she handled it really well. I liked this part of the story and part of the script.
Central refining and storage systems all seem to be in good shape.
Have you looked at the maintenance logs? Because you get the feeling that this place has been breaking down a lot faster than the crew is able to fix.
So we come to find out that aboard the refinery, and that's where Una and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Pelia are tasked to assist with the onlining. We find out from the maintenance logs, that there have been breakdowns, and these breakdowns are just outpacing what the crews have been able to keep up with, which is suspicious to Pelia. But Una kind of dismisses her findings and dismisses her.
I gotta know, what exactly is your problem with me?
I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with the situation.
That is malarkey, and you know it.
I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, I wasn't sure at first why, because Una doesn't seem like a disagreeable person, but
no.
I mean, look, even I get frustrated sometimes with Carol Kane's speech and the way she talks really slow with the accent, and I start to, understand if Una's getting frustrated too. Obviously, that's not why she's upset with her. But there's something going on, and I'm like, yeah, she's kind of annoying me too.
Yeah, and Pelly is still growing on me. I'm not quite there yet with her.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I guess it's the accent that's throwing me off. It seems a little unnecessary.
Yeah, all due respect to Carol Kane, this could be a Pulaski situation. Remember, Dr. Pulaski came in the second season of TNG, then they got rid of her real quick because the fans
just didn't
were like,
work. No. Keep the father-son situation with Wesley and Beverly. So I don't know. She needs to reveal something that makes her a little more, I don't know, edgier than comic relief.
She's definitely edgy because she doesn't give a damn about rules, regulations, or anything like that. But yeah, it's like she's always high, If that's the way she's going to do it, it's the way she's going to do it. We either have to get used to it or, she leaves. It's one or the other.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think you've gotten too used to being the smartest person in the room.
I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room.
Oh, sure you do.
But later on, Una celebrates, getting the refinery online, but just as quickly as she does that, it goes back offline. And so, Pelia has gone through and done her own investigation, despite what Una told her to do, which is basically stay on task. And she confirmed that there is sabotage going on.
Yeah, and this reminded me of, I don't know, you were a fan of Battlestar Galactica in the early episodes when they came across a really scared who they thought was human, was trapped on a space station. It turned out he was a Cylon. I thought that was the same. I thought this guy, he's a double agent or something too. I just did not trust him at all, and he definitely was a creeper. Yeah,
exactly. So they come across this guy, and he appears to be having the same hallucinations that Uhura's having. So I'm like, okay, so what is the connection? What are the parallels? And what's happening to him, because he seems far gone. Is this going to happen to Uhura?
Yeah, and again, this is like, is this a virus? Is this a thing? Because we've seen plenty of Star Trek episodes where one person gets it, then it spreads, and then they got to figure out. And I don't feel like, and I think this is the mistake that a lot of the series made in the 80s, and Voyager did, was they started turning into lizards or whatever. I think Strange New Worlds is smartly avoiding that mishigas.
Yes.
And just being like, let's just ground this a little bit more in reality. So, yeah, I'm thinking whatever this is, it's part of the deuterium or something. And, yeah, this is where Uhura's headed. It's scary.
Yeah, very much so. And I wanted to kind of stay with Una and Pelia because later on, Keelan wants to know why Una has a problem with her. And, Una unloads, basically.
Yeah, and she's like, you were my professor.
Yep, totally. That was such a trip, and she's pissed at her, for the low grade, but it isn't really about that.
No, it's not.
Una, tells Pelia that she's sloppy, she's loose with discipline and on protocols, and doesn't want to follow orders, and basically called her a space hippie,
which I love because that is basically who she is, and that tracks so well with Una's character, who, risked everything to be in Starfleet and is so proud of being an officer. So it was in this exchange that I felt a real adherence to that character, that Una's character really was being who she is, and I liked it a lot. And she's so much taller than Pelia. It's so funny.
There is a matter I've been meaning to discuss. Starfleet is built on a command hierarchy. As such, there are protocols.
You want to tell Starfleet about us?
If there is anything to tell.
During the midst of all this investigation, trying to find out what's happening with Uhura, we do take a moment to, spend time with Nurse Chapel and Spock. And they're in there playing in the break room or in the galley playing, 3D chess.
Right. And Spock pulls the school marm HR discussion. We need to go tell everyone of our relationship. And the thing I love about Chapel's reaction is she's like, do we?
Yeah, no, it's really smart. I mean, on her part, I get it from a rule book standpoint because he is her superior. But at the same time, I get where she's coming from because the moment you announce it now, you've stated it before you've even figured out what it really is.
Right.
In the first place, which is crippling.
Yeah. I mean, he even said, I have feelings for somebody else last week.
Yep.
I believe they went to Pound Town. Did they not? I mean,
yes, they did. They slept together. Yeah. It's very, very clear that they did that.
Yeah, that's fun. I think if you're going to go that far, and there's been so much angst and so much, all the stuff they've shared, I think it's a relationship. I don't think it's as complicated as they're making it. They just don't realize
not, but I don't think it's formal yet. I think it's until it's defined as officially a relationship instead of casual, let's feel it out, then I don't think you need to say anything. I'm with Nurse Chapel.
You're on Team Chapel on this one?
Team Chapel.
I also am on Team Chapel.
Yeah.
I've had deuterium poisoning, and I've gone days without sleep, but I have never punched an officer because of either one. There's something else going on here. And if you let me, I can help you figure out what.
So Kirk decides to help Uhura, and this is after she decks him, and this is after she dissed him in the bar, which was a la 2009 Star Trek at the bar.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad that you mentioned that because, the Abrams verse Kelvin timeline is not. It's almost not canon in a way because it is so alternate, but it's on film and so it's considered canon. But, every time I see Spock and Uhura near each other, I think, you
never know. You never know what they may take from that, but they have to be really careful because now we're playing with the prime timeline, which means that it's truly canon.
Right.
So, I think they're going to be careful with what they do because, nobody wants a reckless Star Trek. So,
yes. And if Strange New Worlds ends up becoming the original series, which it very well could, they're going to have to be really careful about what they do, what stories they tell, all of that. Because that's going to be a sticky wicket.
Exactly. But Kirk decides to help Uhura and takes her medical records to the doctor aboard the Farragut. And it turns out that the guy that Una came across was having similar hallucinations, just like Uhura. So they're following a similar path. And so I'm just trying to figure it out, what the deal is.
Because there was sounds that they were hearing, I think I'm thinking at this point, okay, it's not a virus. Something's happening. Something's being sent, a signal, a communication of some kind. Something's happening. I don't know why it affected him, but the original reason I thought it affected her was because she is, one, a communications officer, and two, if you follow the Kelvin explanation of Uhura, she's multiple dialects and xenolinguistics and all of that, which I think Uhura was anyway, and she has an advanced ear, and so I thought maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, no, I thought I'm starting to think that maybe somebody's trying to speak to her because, like you said, because of those reasons. Same thing with the other guy.
We need to know what you saw, Lieutenant. It's the only way we can help you.
He might not understand us. There's significant damage to the speech and language centers of his brain.
So in sickbay, the officer's being examined. He hears the noise again. He attacks Binga and runs out of sickbay with Pike in pursuit. So I'm like, yeah, some action.
Finally, right? People are running.
Yeah.
La'an jumps in, right? And but then Kirk and Uhura go in a different direction. What's going on there?
Well, Uhura heard had another hallucination, and so she just basically said, "You know what? I'm basically going to cripple your efforts. I'm going to go back to my quarters."
Right. As she confines herself.
Right. Well, that she decides that she will. She doesn't make it there because other things happen.
James.
You two know each other?
Now's not the time to explain, Captain. If you haven't seen Ramon, then...
He must have found a hole to hide in.
Which double back.
Kirk and La'an inevitably come across each other, and I just really thought this was a weird moment. I was just like, okay, I'm ready to see how this is going to play out, because it is a mind screw, because think about it. As we're trying to think about what happened in the alt timeline versus the real timeline, you're trying to figure out where you are in time and space, and I think that La'an is too.
Yeah, and she was told in episode 3 at the end by the time cop, hey, listen, you tell no one about this, right? Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't think of it.
Van Damme just jumped out.
Don't tell anyone. No, she's not allowed to tell anybody, but, you know, this iteration of Kirk is not flirty like previous James T. Kirks. He's not, walking, hips first into other women. You know what I mean? He's more chill in a way, right? He's not a coxman, and yet he's picking up what she's putting down. Now this is acting, right? Like this is the opposite of what we were seeing between Kirk and Sam, where they're talking it out. In this case, it's what they're not saying that's really working, what she's not allowed to say. You can feel the tension going on between the two of them, and he picks up on it and he knows it. And he's like, "You owe me that drink."
Yeah,
he remembered.
Yep. So I don't think we've seen the last of the two of them. So something's going to come out.
Something's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Uhura to all teams. I may have found Lieutenant Ramon in the access tunnel to the port nacelle.
I'm not far. Wait for me.
So on the way back to her quarters, Uhura comes across a hallucinating Ramon, because that's his name, the officer, and tries to appeal to him, and he's sitting there about to do something pretty catastrophic.
Listen, the things you've been seeing, I've been seeing them too. I understand, but whatever it is you saw that made you come here, it wasn't real.
Yeah, so he's frantically going through this sequence, and she's just trying to be like, please don't do this. It's gonna blow up, if not the nacelle, blow up the entire ship. And, he's just about to achieve his goal. And
they get into a fight.
Yeah, they get into a fight. And Deus Ex Machina, as it looks like he's going to win, Kirk arrives and grabs her and says, bridge, emergency beam out, which, by the way, happened immediately. Like, is someone just standing by with a button? I mean, that happened super fast. But
I know.
They beamed out.
Like, is there guys just hanging out right there? Yeah, you know. So, and
it's my whole job is just with my finger on the button when someone asks for it. But yeah, off they go, and then wow, the explosion happens, sucks him out. But it was, you could see it from outside the nacelle. Incredible! Wow, just really, really sad.
Yep, really sad because clearly was, something was going on with him mentally. But I did enjoy Uhura, getting in a few punches. It's the first time I've seen her fight.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
Outside of the original series when they all had the choke collars, I bet 3 cuatros, that whole thing.
We now find out that this isn't the first time Uhura's had hallucinations, and it happened before when her parents died in the shuttle crash. I think her brother died with them too in that shuttle crash. What's this all about? Now I'm like, wait a second. So what's happening now?
Yeah, I was just trying to connect, what was going on. I mean, how does this all tie in together?
Right. It starts to bring in the Kobayashi Maru you've never faced death conversation, which is a big conversation that happens a lot in Star Trek, and I like it. It's real. You're out in the vacuum of space, facing enemies. Death is all around you, and she's never really been able to face it. Even as a Starfleet officer, maybe that's why when she, showed up in, for the first season and pissed everyone off by saying, I just did this because I could. It's like, yeah, you're not taking this seriously. We're all here, risking our lives. Risk is our business,
Exactly. And, it all links back to, like you said, things that have happened in the previous season, and she's never faced death. So in a Kirk way, she hasn't. And, when you join Starfleet, I mean, that's part of the job. It's like joining the military, that's always a possibility. And if you haven't come to terms with that, you can't really, you shouldn't be there.
And even it's Kirk is the one, it's Kirk's the one that tells her, listen, you gotta face it. And it's winning her over, and by avoiding memories of her family and friends.
Exactly.
Death is winning right now. And I love that he says that because he's the Kobayashi Maru guy.
Yep, exactly. He was the perfect person to deliver that to her. And so that, triggers her to think back to something that was in the video, the instructional video that Himmer had regarding not burning out the receiver.
Yeah.
And Uhura hypothesizes that someone's trying to communicate with her and tried to communicate with Ramon. And, Uhura goes to Sam. So here we get Sam's moment.
There's a theory, it's a little bit fringe, but hear me out, that extra-dimensional life forms could actually poke into our space and attach themselves to atoms from our dimension.
Yes, and again, this did bookend the conversation from the beginning, but I don't... Well, maybe it did work, because I know Jim was proud of him. I think it did work. Yeah, it worked. Yeah.
Then, but I mean, they like I said, they bookended it. So they theorize that the life forms in the nebula were trying to communicate, and that the mining of deuterium is hurting them. And this
is a great story. I wish that they didn't figure it out so late, but it makes sense that they did. They needed to, have a mystery. It reminded me of an episode of TNG when it turned out that traveling at high warp was hurting people in space, and so they were limited to warp 5 till they could figure it out. Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, I really do. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, so that I like that. I thought it was a really a great idea. So what do? They got to deactivate the station. They got to stop doing what they're doing right away.
Uhura to Captain Pike. Sir, we need to stop the fuel refinery from being activated.
I'm not sure what's going on, Ensign, but it's too late.
Captain, you have to shut down the station. It's a matter of life or death.
Yeah, and Uhura appeals to Pike to shut it down, and I was a little questioning how easy that came.
Well, look, I've said this since episode 1 of season 1. Pike's ship is a loose ship. He's a guy who's a chef. He's in his cabin with the fire. He's making dinners. He's chill. He allows anyone on the bridge to, make fun of him like Una did. It's an extremely relaxed atmosphere. And I saw an interview with Anson Mount who said, I didn't want to just recreate what Jeffrey Hunter did or Bruce, I can't remember his last name.
Bruce Greenwood.
Bruce Greenwood, thank you. He goes, I wanted to introduce a new captain. I wanted people to see a different kind of, we've seen Kirk, we've seen Spock, we've seen, all the captains. He goes, I wanted people to see a different captain. And that's what we're seeing here. He's just a loose captain. And yeah, she kind of stood and he's like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, shut it down. Like she's suddenly the captain.
Yeah. She orders Uhura orders
Yeah. Fire!
the torpedoes be fired. And I was just like, okay, all right.
Yep.
Yeah. So that took care of that. And so later on, Uhura and Pelia meet back up again, and we find out that Pelia was Himmer's professor at the academy.
Yeah. And she goes, he was my best student. Actually, I'm kidding. He was average. Which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
I'll give it to her. Like I said before, maybe her jokes, maybe she'll give it the levity it needs. Who knows?
We'll see. Yeah. She'll get an episode at some point, maybe next season. But this episode was full of Hemmer, and I love that he came back forward. They told us in the off season that he would appear. Obviously, it's in flashback, but he's just I love that character. I miss him. I can't believe I miss him. He was just there for one season, but I just thought he was great.
Yeah. And so they wrap up a couple of bows. So Sam Kirk and James Kirk are sitting there, and I thought it was kind of funny. Sam acknowledges James for what he did, but James does it to Sam.
I've been wanting to say, the Farragut is lucky to have you, Jim. I'm proud of you, honestly.
Thanks, Sam.
And that was good because that's how brothers are too, right? That's how it can be. They're staying true to their characters.
Yeah. So I thought that was actually pretty funny. And then, alas, Kirk meets Spock for the first time.
Yeah, and that was magic on so many levels. And what that tells me, and I'm sure it told you this too, is Kirk is here to stay now on this series. I think they floated him out as a test balloon last season. They gave him an episode this season, which was fantastic. And one of the problems I've had this season is we almost never see Pike. He's only been featured in 2 episodes. Mostly he's been a background player. I don't think the actor Anson Mount cares too much. He loves what he's doing. But I still think this is Pike's show. And I feel like they're kind of making it Kirk's show, or they're going to start wedging him in more. And I'm not ready for that. I still want it to be a Pike series. What are your thoughts?
No, I actually 100% agree with that. I mean, Pike is the captain of the Enterprise. It's his voice that starts this thing off. And so let's see more Pike. But I think there's more to come. I think they always somehow manage to, with the last 4 episodes to go strong. So, I think something's going to happen. I mean, like last season, Pike went out strong. I mean, good grief. Yeah. Episode 10 was like the best episode of the entire season last year. And I can't imagine that they would go out with a dud.
Yeah, I think they realize how important all of this is. Well, this was a good week. This episode was full of a lot of cool people. A lot of people featured. It was a great story. The Gorn did not show up, but I still think they were behind the message. We don't know who that species was. Maybe it was a trick. So I'm putting money down on it that we're not done with that story either.
I will entertain you on that theory. There's got to be more to it than just some aliens. More to it. It's too strategic. I mean, the refinery was too strategic on the edge of Gorn space. Yep. So I'm going to say that something else is on the horizon.
Yeah, I think Uhura was bamboozled, and we're going to find that out. And if they do that, that's great storytelling, because they're setting us up for something else, which I think would be incredible.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool.
How about your favorite one this week? Would you have a moment?
You know what? I think the moment that I liked the most was Una and Pelia going at it. I thought that was pretty cool.
I thought that was good. I struggle with Pelia, but she'll be an acquired taste. I had a lot of favorite moments, but I think just seeing Hemmer in general and having him there for the episode was nice. It was just nice to have him there. So that was my favorite part.
Alrighty, Steve. Well, I look forward to seeing what episode 7 brings us. I don't have a a crystal ball or a tip of the hat to know what the heck is coming, but we do know that the...
I know, yeah. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen even a teaser, so yeah.
Yes, and we do know that the Strange New Worlds Lower Decks crossover is hanging out there, and we know that the Gorn will have to make a big badass appearance before the season's over. So, there are only 4 episodes left, so I think we're about to get slapped.
Maybe Boimler will be killed by the Gorn. What?
No, that would be a trip. Yeah.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah. Well, that concludes this episode of Energize, a Strange New Worlds podcast.
Hey, if you want to check out what we're doing online, go to www.energizepodcasts.com. And just a quick tease for you, when this season is over with Strange New Worlds, Anthony and I have a special one-off episode we're going to do, and we'll talk about it in the coming weeks.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Anthony McLemore.
I'm Steve Truitt. Live long and prosper.